Listen to me, Kevin. I am not talented and my cartoons are not great. They suck. I suck. I suck. I suck. I suck.
Look, Pim, I know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
Hey, Mission Hill! Andy French sucks!
No, you don't, Andy.
Stop yelling, the both of yous!
You were listening to Lonely Fans Podcast. Okay guys, before we get started, today's video is sponsored by Honey. Yes, Honey. Honey is a handy-dandy online resource.
Wait a minute!
No, I'm just playing. I don't have the subs for any sponsor. Look at the last time I uploaded. I can't even afford this joke. I stole it from Tyreek. But yeah. Hey there, my name is Aliu and this is Max. And you are listening to Lonely Fan... Oh, wait, I already said that. About a year and some change ago, I made a quirky review-esque video about a little old cartoon known as Mission Hill. I started writing the script for that video right around the time of the US's mandatory COVID lockdown. That was the first and probably the last time in my adult life where I was legally obligated to stay home from work for my own safety, whilst being paid my average wages. So, being a nostalgia-addicted millennial fucking nerd that grew up in the pioneer era of YouTube content commentary, I have always kind of wanted to make my own reviewer channel. And I remember thinking, what better time to do this now than when I'm temporarily free from the cogs of the capitalist machine, and where the concept of time takes a backseat to my own hedonistic whim. Granted, I was still learning the bare basics of video editing at this point, and thus it took me way too long to produce my initial video, despite having all the time in the world. But I digress. That was my very first YouTube video, and let me tell you, I used every little precious drop of serotonin my clinically depressed little brain could possibly produce at the time. And, well, I was, and still am, very proud of the video actually. I still remember jumping the shark at the time, by tagging Bill Oakley in my rendition of Grown Up Andy on Twitter, when in fact, my video was probably still only about 85% finished at the time. Well, to my surprise, he retweeted it, which of course gave my sketch some traction. Needless to say, I worked my ass off to make sure the video came out the following night. Sleepy damned. The video ultimately didn't do gangbusters like my naive ass thought it would. In fact, part 1 to my Code Lyoko retrospect is doing slightly better somehow. But then again, given Mission Hill's obscurity, I guess I can't be all that surprised. Lockdown in the States ended, and I eventually had to return to my full daytime job. And I didn't get a whole lot done with the channel afterward. I honestly don't know how the hell you kids do it. Producing these 30-minute plus videos weekly, or even monthly, that shit has got to be extremely taxing on you. And I don't mean to come off as a dehydrated, cynical boomer or anything, but every time I hear,
"This is how I pay my bills. This is not a hobby for me,"
I honestly take deep solace in having job security in a reliable milquetoast retail gig. That being said, you creators have my utmost respect for being able to keep up with the almighty algorithm, and I mean that in the most sincere, genuine way possible.
Okay,
with all of that out of the way, I'd like to share my latest project with you guys. I thought it'd be fun to explore the concept of a Mission Hill reunion episode, and so I got to work on studying McMullen's character designs and shelled out a few more renditions of the gang aged up to be around 35 or so. Oh, real quick, I am still very much working on these storyboard panels at the time of this recording, and thus I'm going to be very inconsistent with showing art explaining what I'm currently describing. I'd love to have enough panels done for every part of this video, but that would take up another few months most likely. But yeah, here we go. You've already seen this one many times. I touched it up recently, but I won't spend much time here. Since Andy was meant to become Matt Groening, I gave him some Groening-esque bangs and a light unkempt beard. Andy has never really been a health-conscious kind of guy, nor has he shown to give a shit if he looks a little pudgy, and thus I thought an earnest beer belly would be appropriate for him. Finally, I gave him a semi-professional modern outfit since he works in an office cubicle now. I wanted future Andy's story to be somewhat of a mirror of his original one. A perpetually cynical artist with big dreams and aspirations of doing more with his talent. Only this time around, Andy's actually already a professional animator, working at, let's say Fox, and is doing well for himself. However, even though he has seemingly succeeded in his field of work, he's stuck working on animated sitcoms like Family Guy or whatever, which has left him feeling somewhat unfulfilled. He has an idea for his own animation project, which is titled The Downtowners, wink wink, nudge nudge, but is repeatedly brushed off by his superiors when trying to sell his ideas. We'll come back to Andy's story later, since the main plot will be rotating around him after all. Oh yeah, he's still with good old Gwen, but I think it would be out of character for him to be married to her in a conventional sense. I was thinking engaged, but hesitant to pull the trigger, or perhaps Andy and Gwen are recently reunited years after a bad breakup. I don't know how to write romance, but anyway, moving on. Next we have my favorite character, Posey Tyler. In Mission Hill Future, Posey becomes a social media influencer and sells your mom energy rocks and tarot readings. I can't really explain why, but it just seemed natural to me for her wardrobe to take a goth, witchy, hot tattoo mama direction as she gets older. As for the influencer entrepreneur aspect of her arc, though Posey on the surface can come off as a stereotypical handout hippie whatever kind of girl, she's actually pretty motivated when it comes to making her money, which is something I got totally wrong in my first video. In the pilot episode, the douchebag aspect, she gets the idea from Jim to sell vegetables from her garden to the local grocery store.
Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you sell them? Start your own business. People pay top dollar for organic vegetables.
Oh wow, that's a great idea. I was going to give them to charity, but where is the fun in that? I want to make some money.
When the store owner tries to short her on their deal, Posey just straight up corporate Tom nukes this guy. Twice.
How much are they?
Those not for sale yet. She a wholesaler. Okay, I buy all your vegetables. 30 cents, right?
Oh, yeah, okay. No, not anymore. Now they're $2 each.
Okay, you win. I buy all your crazy expensive vegetables.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm glad we could work this out, Howard. I will also need a 40% franchising bonus, a small shelving fee, and of course an exclusive point of purchase display to maintain my brand integrity.
You don't really see this arrangement ever again, as it's not really relevant to anything, but it's safe to assume this was one of her many side hustles. Many non-sexual side hustles.
Listen up. There is nothing sexual about these massages. If anyone's here for sex, this is not that kind of establishment.
Thank you!
But anyway, my point being, Posey has probably always been a go-getter, and it only makes sense she'd eventually dive into the modern era of independent business. I should also mention, I designed an OC for Mission Hill Future, Rose Garcelle, who is Posey's partner and cameraman. I'll get back to her when I'm panhandling my Patreon later. But anyway, future Posey's story will basically be her dealing with the fact that even though she's made a very lucrative career as an online micro-celebrity, Posey feels as though she's been fully consumed by the daunting task of keeping up with social media algorithms and constantly having to upload new content. Something I think a lot of us can relate to, or at least have witnessed. Posey also wrestles with a feeling that somewhere along the way, she's lost the moonchild side of her that was free-spirited and unshackled by greed and corporate sponsorship. Yes, I felt like a tool for saying that just now. I'm thinking of bringing back her superego stand, or whatever that was in that episode, Stories of Hope and Forgiveness, as a manifestation of her insecurities and regrets. And next up, we have fun Posey fact. The reason why she talks in that cute, gaspy voice that sounds like she's drowning.
My first client. How exciting. I was trying to do Andy a favor and take a message. I'm sorry.
Is because her voice actor, Vicki Lewis, actually had some dental work done right before recording the role for Posey, and apparently everyone loved it. Kinda reminds me of Virgil from Devil May Cry 3's voice actor, Daniel Southworth, having a cold or something prior to recording, and thus unintentionally giving Virgil this appropriately decorous voice.
What are you getting at?
Just the perfect amount of nasal to be a counterweight to Dante's Ninja Turtle diction. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so here's Mr. Jim Kubak. I have heavily touched on this before in the first video, but Jim's natural, hedonistic, yet do no harm nature is literally too benevolent for me to even dare alter in any kind of way. Thus, when I was designing him, I simply thought, do the exact same, but just older. And with that notion, I instantly knew he'd have a big old lumberjack hipster beard and a ponytail. As for the Starbucks cup, Jim is always snacking on something, and has always kind of been a guy to ride the waves of the new age culture.
Seriously, man, how long are you gonna keep this up?
Just until they catch on. Then I'm off where the millennium takes me.
And even though Starbucks has been around since the late 70s, they've definitely become more overall prominent and thus more representative of modern culture, which is one of the main themes of the story. Also, I could definitely see Jim being a regular at Starbucks, like to the point where all the baristas know his name. I think that's about it for Jim's design. Like I said, Jim's character is so natural, he practically designed himself. I experimented with giving him some silver fox grays, but I don't think I could make it work. After all, I can't really imagine Jim really getting stressed out about anything to make him gray earlier than age 50. Ironically, I made his story the most sobering. In the future, Jim, involuntarily, moves up to vice CEO of his company, and thus levels up to having this nice corporate jacket with his actual name on it. He's also married to his old secretary, whose name totally escapes me. He's even a proud father to a 1-year-old baby. I'm actually still thinking of a name for her. As for his story's premise, Jim's aforementioned untouchable peace of mind is being challenged. In the episode Unemployment, we see Jim hailed as a corporate genius guru by his peers and superiors, despite Jim's own obvious indifference. Things nowadays with his colleagues have escalated to the point where the company is so dependent on his say that Jim spends the majority of his time held up in his office, much to his dismay. He's being well taken care of course. However, things with the wife and kid aren't so peachy keen. With Jim constantly being needed at work, he's been inadvertently neglecting his little family. Even though his wife is understanding and patient with his predicament, practically raising their child on her own, and never getting to see him has strained their marriage. When I was initially brainstorming Jim's arc, I felt that it had to be somewhat somber, given to be way too easy to just write something simple and goofy, two traits that are normally associated with Jim. I wanted to create a kind of dire or responsible, I guess, side of him that we otherwise probably would never see or think of. A side that would show how he would react if he actually felt under fire or had to make a hard decision that personally would affect his life. Don't worry, he's still best boy.
We better get out of here, man. Hold up, I gotta take a leak.
And lastly, we have Kevin. Believe it or not, future Kevin was the trickiest character to write and draw for. I'm actually redesigning his future look around the time of this recording because I felt I just couldn't get him quite right. At first I was thinking Kevin ironically becomes somewhat of a degenerate like his older brother in his 20s. But Kevin can be a prudent little jerk sometimes, but he's still a good kid. It would feel kinda mean-spirited to have him grow up to be a piece of shit. So then I went in a more predictable direction. You know, pasty, Harvard graduate tech wizard type. But that would be too boring, and I wouldn't know what to do with him since his arc at that point would be pretty much complete. So I ended up kinda merging both ideas, and came up with something I found much more compelling. In Kevin's arc, he actually does make it to Yale, but ends up dropping out freshman year to pursue a career in streaming games on Twitch with George and Toby. He's still as frail and nerdy as ever, only now he's adopted some of Andy's more self-serving traits. I thought it'd be funny if his career was on par with, say, PewDiePie or Markiplier, in the sense that he's very successful, at least from a business perspective, but also very vulnerable to online harassment, cancel culture, etc. I also wrote him to be in what he thinks is a relationship with a quote-unquote hot e-girl-esque girlfriend that pretty much just uses him for his money. I'm currently wrestling with the idea of the alleged girlfriend being an aged-up weirdie from the episode Hot for Weirdy, but I'll probably end up going with a brand new character since I can't see her really relying on Kevin, of all people, as a simp cash pig. I don't know, we'll see. And I know I made it sound like Kevin's girlfriend is the conflict of his story, but really, as of now, that's actually a really small part of his segment, and I plan on playing that relationship up for laughs. After all, it wouldn't be Mission Hill if the plot took itself too seriously, and every little thing had to be deep and impactful. But I digress. Kevin isn't really going through any sort of major existentials like everyone else is, excluding some streamer-related insomnia, nor is he any kind of social pariah. He's relatively happy where he is in life right now. It just kind of made sense for me to write Kevin's story as a more upbeat, comic relief segment. Plus, Kevin in the original show has always kind of been happy-go-lucky for the most part, you know, when he's not being paranoid, manic, bullied, holier than thou, or in a scrap with Andy. Actually, it's Kevin and Andy's polarizing segments that ties everyone to the main plot, which I'll elaborate more in the closing segment shortly. I just wanted to give you guys as much clarity and thought into my character design choices as possible, as I'm obviously not McMullen, even though a few of you on the Mission Hill subreddit were convinced I was. I love you, but I'm definitely not. And again, obviously, I didn't work on Mission Hill to any capacity, so who the hell am I to say what Andy, Posey, Kevin, and Jim would look like nowadays, much less write what they would do and say? No one really. Just a humble fucking nerd artist, really, and a fan of a show I wanted to see more of before it got cancelled, probably just like yourself. But anyway, time for a quick intermission. Yo. Fancy meeting you here. Thank you. I hope you're getting enough sleep in your daily routine, man. That sort of thing is really easy to neglect, and I want you to be healthy. Do you remember that episode of Jackie Chan Adventures when Jade accidentally became a Shadowcon master? She goes all goth and starts acting out like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3. I love it. Tragically underrated episode. But, hey, I just want you to know I think you're doing great for yourself. I'm rooting for you. I know things can get pretty overwhelming, and at times giving up seems like the best option, but you've come such a long way, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Now back to the show. So, just for the sake of clarity, this ending segment is essentially an abridged telling of a fanfic I'm writing for Mission Hill. Oh, and I pretty much wrote this part a month or two after I started this project, meaning I'll have a few more details in terms of plot. That being said, I'm actually not much of a writer if you couldn't tell already, but thanks in advance for bearing with me. Like I mentioned before, Mission Hill Future, which I am now calling Mission Hill Here and Now's themes center around, well, the future, and more specifically, the future in perspective of Candy. God damn it. The future in perspective of Andy, Kevin, Posey, and Jim, all of whom are pretty affiliated with the simpler times of the early 2000s, as depicted in the show. That's not to say life was necessarily better back then, just simpler. Yeah, social media, a concept that greatly influences our society today, arguably in every aspect, was still in its infancy back then. The closest thing we had to that was AOL Instant Messenger, and God forbid your family only had one Ethernet phone line thingy. I still remember fussing at my mom to get off the phone so I could play cool flash games on CartoonNetwork.com. Obviously, things nowadays are very different. For better or worse, I'll leave that up to you. I will say, however, it's much easier, probably too much easier, to compare your progress in life to your peers, or anyone really. With that reality, that new and tangible bar of expectation in mind, there comes this involuntary need to constantly reflect on ourselves. Our mistakes, our missed opportunities, friends that were once near and dear that are no longer part of our lives, or perhaps past relationships that pain you to think about. All these life experiences are more or less digitally cataloged now, and personally, as someone approaching their dirty 30s in 2022, that reality kind of scares me. Sorry to go on a rant there, just trying to create some atmosphere for those of you who are still watching or listening. Okay, but for real, here's the plot. Mission Hill Here and Now takes place 20 years in the future, making it 2020. The gang at this point are all split up and are all living their individual lives. I've already talked about everyone's place in life earlier in the video, so I'll do my very best to breeze past anything I've already mentioned. Andy has worked his way up to becoming a professional animator, but feels unfulfilled as he's stuck working on shows and content that he personally has no interest in. He has his own original concept for a cartoon that he desperately tries to sell to his higher-ups, but constantly gets brushed off. All the rejections lead Andy to feel like he's working at the mattress factory all over again, stuck in a artistic limbo of sorts. Only now, Andy's old, and he knows it. Andy's now fiancée, Gwen, does her best to pull Andy out of his midlife crisis, but to no avail. For unknown reasons, aka I'm still deciding, Andy hasn't communicated with Kevin, Posey, or even his best friend, Jim, in years, and Andy has made a habit of swallowing his emotions and stewing in his moods. Well, more so than usual. One fateful night, his misery keeps him from falling asleep, which prompts him to drown his thoughts in cheap beer. And of course, he overindulges and proceeds to get shit-faced on his outdoor balcony in the middle of the night. In the midst of his drunken state, he starts to reminisce about the old days with his brother and roommate. Next, Andy does the unthinkable and types out a long, sappy drunk text and sends it out to Kevin, Posey, and Jim, and passes out. End scene. By the way, real quick, I think a lot of us can agree that one of the scariest things to experience as you grow up is having a close friend or a group of close friends slowly drift away from you as you get older and become preoccupied with the other aspects of your adult life. The scary part being able to see it all happen in real time, and for one reason or another, being helpless to stop it. This isn't always the case, of course. I'm just expressing a life experience that I think a lot of us can relate to. Anyway, let's move on. Posey is now your typical micro-celebrity influencer, yada yada yada, and shares a lavish apartment with her partner, Rose. Like I mentioned before, behind the upbeat daily uploads, Posey is crumbling under the stress of essentially having to be attached to her phone. She feels like a shell of her former self. And, don't get me wrong, folks. This isn't me commenting on the mental practicality of having a lucrative career as a content creator. I hope to achieve something like that myself, actually. But I do find it fascinating how often online creators nowadays will nosedive their careers into the black abyss via self-destruction, whether it be a mental breakdown or cancel culture or whatever. I mean, there's a whole genre of YouTube videos discussing the rise and fall of famous creators. Not to say that I'm above watching them. We all enjoy a good trash fire, right? Right. So anyway, after another long day of posting news feed fodder for the fans, Posey, with bags under her eyes, gazes into the mirror and happens to notice an old photo of her and the gang from way back. It's at this point, thoughts of, is this what I wanted for myself? I'm thriving, so I'm happy, right? Begin to surface, giving Posey a migraine. As Posey takes an ibuprofen, her spirit ego, which is reminiscent of her younger self in appearance, emerges and chastises her for taking pharmaceutical medications, something Posey in the past would probably be against in favor of natural home remedies, and continues to critique Posey's new capitalist sellout lifestyle. Posey has a back and forth with her mirror when suddenly her phone gets a notification buzz from someone she hasn't heard from in a long time. End scene. Good old Jim is now the vice CEO of the advertisement company we see him in the original show, reluctantly. I say reluctantly because he's gone from being a young, savvy tech wizard with the uncanny ability of making lucrative marketing decisions for a company seemingly run by clueless boomer types, to a corporate, all-knowing God King who's constantly being leaned on for his divine intervention on every little thing. He's reached somewhat of a cult leader status amongst his peers. This puts Jim in a position where he's perpetually stuck in his office, constantly signing off on company decisions, which not only takes a toll on his mental health, his peace of mind, but is also harming his relationship with his wife and child. During one of Jim's many virtual meetings with the fumbling out-of-touch CEO, he gets a call from his wife. It is then Jim realizes he nearly forgot tonight is his beloved wife's birthday and abruptly calls off his meeting. Make no mistake, just because Jim is willing to stick with a job he doesn't necessarily like, doesn't mean he's lost his sense of doing whatever the fuck he wants over the years. Jim leaves his office and attempts to sneak his way to the elevator in hopes of avoiding any of his needy colleagues, to no avail. After a hijinks-induced chase, Jim finally makes it to his car and floors it. Man, I really wish I had the time to drop these scenes I'm describing, but I don't. At least not for this video. So I'm going to need all of you to use your imagination just a little bit. Here we go. The sun is just about to set and we see Jim hauling ass on the highway. He inspects his face and hair in the rearview mirror. In that same mirror, we can see some last-second birthday balloons and flowers in the back seat. Jim readjusts his mirror and he notices a patch of gray hair in his beard. Jim experiences a brief moment of reflection and almost immediately shrugs it off. It is now late into the evening. Jim pulls up in front of his home and frantically gets out of the car while juggling the gifts for his wife. On the way up to the door, he notices his parents-in-law's car in the parking space next to him, which causes him to sigh and take a deep breath. The in-laws can be a handful. Jim knocks on the door, and before it's answered, he receives a buzz from his pocket. Thinking it's someone from work, he goes to silence his phone, only to be shocked at the text he just received. End scene. We open up to a very tense, very down-to-the-wire Fortnite, PUBG, whatever match that Kevin is on the very cusp of winning. Kevin is sweating bullets as his fans in the chat grow ever clamorous. Kevin then unleashes his revered bling blong chat, zeroing out all distractions and bolstering his focus and aim. Everyone in the chat also spams bling blong in support of him, and lo and behold, Kevin just narrowly defeats his opponent. His character, of course, does a celebratory victory dance. After basking in his glory, Kevin thanks his viewers for the support and of course requests that they like, comment, and subscribe to his channels, as well as his girlfriend's fans only, which, by the way, fuck it. as I'm typing this right now, I've decided to go with the aged up weirdy idea. Yeah, it's convenient and corny that the only love interest that Kevin sort of had in the show is now his girlfriend in the future, but this video is corny. This whole channel is corny. You're corny for making it this far into the video, and I love that about you. Don't you ever change. Shit, where was I? Oh yeah, Kevin bids his audience a farewell and removes his cat ear headphones and gaming visor, both of which are absolutely littered with sponsor logos. Kevin then checks his time logs and sighs in relief at the fact that he's only been streaming for, a measly 23 hours. Then, without skipping a beat, he instantly sulks into his chair and falls into a catatonic-esque slumber. Kevin's phone goes off. You can probably guess why at this point. Only Kevin's not gonna hear any of that, being asleep and all. And scene. Whoo boy, this portion of the script felt extra cringe, especially when I was reading it out loud and listening to it over and over again as I edit. But whatever, it's a time skip fanfic for Mission Hill of all things. I actually had a little more story planned out as I was finishing up this video, but at this point I'd be giving away too much, especially when I'm still making decisions involving the basic foundations of the story. And like, goddamn, I just need this video to be out, to be done. In my year's absence, I've been working on myself, body and spirit and all that jazz. My mental health as of late has been a net positive. Destroy! For the most part. And I'm currently poised to be more productive with my content and the channel, for the most part. Mission Hill will breathe life again, even if I have to do it myself. From what I can tell, the Gus and Wally reboot hasn't been picked up yet, and the last thing I would ever want for this show is to watch it sink right back into deep obscurity. I can easily see Netflix scooping it up for a reboot. I mean, just look at Rocko's Modern Life or Invader Zim. Could you imagine if Netflix did a live-action Mission Hill series? That'd be so stupid. Well, actually, it could be an interesting adaptation, but anyway, I'm thinking maybe this video and my aforementioned fan episode might do something for Mission Hill's relativity, or at the very least, entertain its cult following. But more likely, only 30 or so people even see it. It doesn't really matter to me. Literally just one guy getting stoked on my Posey sketch was enough for me to start this project, so. And if you're still watching to this point, you're the best. And I'm sorry you had to put up with my neurotic storytelling. Whenever I do drop the actual episode, hopefully not in a million years like last time, it'll be told in a strictly mock storyboard format of sorts. Just sketches basically, and me spoon feeding you the story, just like you back at home. Speaking of sketches, if you haven't already, please give the channel as well as my social medias a follow, especially Twitter. God, please give me a reason to be active on Twitter. As of now, I pretty much go on there and just like disassociate. Like, what am I actually supposed to just like post shit on here daily? Is that fun for you guys? Maybe I'm just old, damn. By the way, for a measly singular dollar a month, you can help support this project as well as the channel. And for a limited time, I'll be drawing Mission Hill portraits of any new patrons, much like this one here. But yeah, as I mentioned before, I plan on uploading way more. I'm currently working on this idea of having a weekly, quick, sort of rapid-fire retrospective series where I discuss cartoons, movies, or any media that I've been wanting to praise, dissect, or condemn, etc. And having that interaction with you, the viewer, would really help create a healthy sense of urgency for me when it comes to productivity. I'm trying to break out of my reclusive shell here and be a little more interactive with my audience, you know? Anyways, shoutouts to the Mission Hill subreddit for foolishly liking up my artwork and making me think I can impersonate a storyboard artist. Shoutouts to my beloved 3 patrons over on my Patreon. Shoutouts to Bill Oakley for giving my fan art your blessing. That seriously meant the world to me. I can't believe networks are ducking Gus and Wally right now because they feel the main characters would be too old for the audience to relate to. That's insanity. That's stupid. Who watched the show? Millennials. That's us. We're old. We're getting old. I mean, that's so weird. Who watched the show? Millennials mostly. Like people who can identify with getting old. I don't get it. Oh, and shoutouts to your mom for last night. That's it. Sorry for taking forever to post. Sorry I was ever born. Just started working on Code Lyoko Part 2 again. Okay, bye.